citizens.
Yeah, the mighty Tron.
Exactly. Hamilton. We are looking at a high-growth metro area facing massive infrastructure demands, but we are actually using Hamilton today as a case study for what happens when the machinery of local government goes completely rogue. We are analyzing the fallout from the 2024 KPMG audit of the Hamilton City Council, which was a report that uncovered a procurement crisis involving nearly $250 million.
It is a crisis, undeniably, but the debate we are having today is really about the nature of that failure. Is this, as you seem quite ready to argue, a story of systemic rot, a lack of transparency, and broken democratic trust? Or is it actually a symptom of a much more complex human problem?
Right.
You know, a story about a toxic workplace culture, massive infrastructure pressure, and a system that forced good people to break the rules just to keep the city running.
And that is exactly the central question. We are looking at this from the vantage point of the new council, the one elected in late 2025, which is currently navigating a 3-year reform roadmap inherited from this whole disaster. So I will be arguing that this was a catastrophic failure of fiscal stewardship and transparency, and that the sheer scale of noncompliance requires a strict systemic overhaul.
And I will be taking the position that this failure was a complex byproduct of a broken organizational environment, and that focusing purely on the financial metrics misses the root cause, which is a toxic culture, meaning we need a much more nuanced, human-centric solution.
All right, well, let's not bury the lead here. We need to start with the numbers because they are, frankly, eye-watering for a local government context. Between 2021 and 2023, the Hamilton City Council awarded approximately $239.1 million in non-tendered contracts.
It's a massive sum.
It is, but it's not just the sum, it's the proportion. That figure accounted for 75% of the council's total active contractual engagements. So 3/4 of the time the council needed to buy something, whether it was roading materials, consultancy, IT services, they just didn't go to the open market. They didn't ask who can do this best or who can do this cheapest. They just signed the check.
I want to clarify the term non-tendered for the listeners, though, because it can sound like they just handed out cash in a briefcase in the council parking lot.
Well,
No, seriously, in many cases, these were existing suppliers where contracts were simply rolled over, or where the cumulative spend ticked over the procurement limit without anyone flagging it. It wasn't necessarily malicious.
but that distinction doesn't absolve the sin at all. Cumulative spend is the silent killer of municipal budgets. It's when you hire a contractor for, say, a $50,000 job, which is fine, it's under the threshold for a formal tender, but then you hire them 10 more times.
Sure.
And suddenly you have spent $500,000 without ever testing the market to see if that contractor is actually charging a fair rate. That is exactly what the KPMG audit found. It is massive procurement leakage.
I accept that leakage occurred. There is no denying the audit, but we have to look at why it happened. You are painting a picture of deliberate negligence, and I am looking at the context. Hamilton is one of the fastest-growing cities in New Zealand. They are projecting something like $6.3 billion in infrastructure spending over the next decade. The pressure on these staff to build, to get pipes in the ground, to get roads paved, housing enabled is immense.
Pressure is not an excuse for abandoning the rule book when you are dealing with ratepayer money.
It is when the rule book is too heavy to lift. The KPMG report didn't just find math errors or lazy accounting. It specifically found, and I'm quoting here, toxic organizational culture within the procurement branches. It cited frequent friction, confrontational behaviors, high workloads, and extremely high staff turnover. When you have a department that is effectively a war zone, where staff are burned out and terrified of making mistakes, compliance is the first casualty. They weren't bypassing tenders to steal money, they were bypassing them to survive the workload.
Survival is a very, very generous term for risking $239 million. Let's look at the financial backdrop during this exact same period. The council's debt tripled. It went from about $400 million in 2019 to $1.2 billion. Now, I am not saying the non-tendered contracts caused all of that debt, obviously, but when a city has that much debt, every single dollar needs to be fought for. If you aren't tendering, you are paying an inefficiency tax. You are paying top dollar because your team is too toxic, to use your word, to negotiate.
I strongly disagree with the implication that it's about not wanting to negotiate. Tendering is an incredibly expensive, time-consuming administrative process.
It's required by policy.
Required? Yes. But think about the mechanics. It requires scope definition, legal review, market analysis, evaluation panels. If you have high staff turnover, which the report absolutely confirms they did, you literally do not have the bodies in the room to run a tender for every single project. The choice the staff were facing wasn't negotiate or don't negotiate. The choice was follow the rules and delay the city's water infrastructure by 6 months, or renew the existing contract and keep the water running.
Look, if you cannot run the process, you pause the spending. You elevate the risk to the executive level. You don't just open the floodgates in the dark. This is exactly the difference between the public and private sectors. If a private CFO found out their team had skipped the tender process on 75% of their spend, we wouldn't be having a podcast debate about their culture. There would be a forensic investigation and immediate terminations. The council owes the ratepayers a fundamental duty of care, and they failed it.
The private sector analogy only goes so far, though. A private company can just choose not to build a road if the admin is too hard. A city council cannot. They have statutory obligations. But I want to pivot here to your second major charge, the idea of the cover-up, because I think this is where your argument about a democratic failure really hinges.
Absolutely. This is the smoking gun of the whole crisis. The KPMG report lands in 2024. It is scathing. And what does the council do? Do they release it immediately to the public? No. They relegate it to a brief discussion. They minimize the findings. And crucially, they use the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, LGIMA, to exclude the public from the details entirely.
Specifically, Section 72J.
Right, exactly. Section 72J, which allows a council to withhold information to prevent improper gain or improper advantage. They took a legal shield that was designed to protect active commercial negotiations, and they used it to hide a systemic failure of competence. And look at the timing. This happened exactly as they were finalizing the 2024 to 2034 long-term plan. They were actively asking Hamilton residents for a massive 16.5% rates hike.
It was a very difficult political moment. I'll grant you that.
It wasn't just difficult, it was fundamentally deceptive. They were asking ratepayers for significantly more money while actively suppressing evidence that they had lost control of how they spent the money they already had. How can a ratepayer make an informed submission on a rates hike if they don't know the council's procurement engine has exploded? It deprived the democratic process of crucial data. Advocacy groups like the Taxpayers Union were absolutely right to slam them for burying it.
I see why it looks that way from the outside, and the optics are terrible. But let's look at this through the lens of a genuinely distressed organization. You mentioned improper advantage. Think about what that KPMG report actually contained. It likely detailed exactly where the internal controls were broken. It showed exactly where the checks and balances didn't exist.
It showed they were incompetent.
That showed they were vulnerable. If I am a large construction firm or a service provider in the Waikato, and I get my hands on an unredacted report that essentially says Hamilton City Council has no idea how to price these contracts and their internal team is too chaotic to check invoices properly, what do? I raise my prices. I push for looser terms.
That assumes vendors aren't already doing that. If 75% of the work is non-tendered, it suggests the market already knew the council was an easy mark.
Perhaps they suspected it, but publishing the official how-to guide on exploiting the council would have cemented that damage. The decision to exclude the public might have been politically convenient for the councillors, yes, but it was also commercially rational for the city. They needed time to fix the leaks before they advertised the blueprints of their sinking ship to the open market.
I just don't buy it. Commercial sensitivity is the ultimate refuge of the scoundrel in local government. We see it used constantly to hide embarrassment, not just trade secrets. By setting up a task force and keeping it entirely behind closed doors, they were managing the political optics, not the municipal finances. They clearly wanted to get that 16.5% hike approved before the scandal broke in the press. That is political preservation, pure and simple.
We can debate the motives of the 2024 council all day, but we are here now. The report is out, the new council elected in late 2025 is in place, and we have the reform roadmap. And this is where I really think we need to focus, because this dictates the future of the Waikato.
The 35-point roadmap? Yes.
Right. A year after that initial brief discussion, the council began working through these 35 initiatives. It is a 3-year plan. It focuses on strengthening procurement systems, improving project management, and ensuring value for money across the board.
And this is the solution. It has to be. The new council needs to be absolutely ruthless in implementing these 35 points. We need automated flags in the software for cumulative spend. We need strict segregation of duties so the person scoping the contract isn't the same person approving the final invoice. We need a hard no tender, no contract policy embedded in the executive KPIs.
And here is where I worry you, and frankly, perhaps the new council, are missing the point all over again. You are treating this like it's a software update. You think if you just install better procurement systems and write a stricter policy manual, the problem magically goes away.
Systems create accountability. That's how large organizations function.
Systems only work if the people inside the building actually use them. Remember the toxic culture the audit highlighted? The friction, the confrontation, the burnout? You cannot software patch a toxic workplace. If the staff in that office still hate coming to work, if the engineers still view the procurement team as the Department of No, and if the procurement officers are still terrified of making a mistake, they will find a way around your shiny new system. They always do.
So what is your alternative? Group therapy for procurement officers? We are talking about managing a $1.2 billion debt. We don't have time for council management to sit around checking the vibes of the office.
It is not about vibes. It is about psychological safety, which is a hard operational reality. If you impose your ruthless controls on a team that is already fragile and deeply understaffed, you will break the team. They will just leave, and then you have zero internal procurement capacity. Then what happens? You're paying external consultants $300 an hour to do the job your staff used to do, and your inefficiency tax goes through the roof. The reform has to be human-centric first.
But the ratepayers cannot afford the time it takes to heal a culture. They are paying that 16.5% rates hike right now. They are dealing with the cost of living crisis right now. They want to know that when the council buys a kilometer of asphalt, they aren't getting completely ripped off. The value from money concept is the absolute engine room of the council. If that engine is stalled, you don't comfort the mechanic, you fix the engine. But the mechanic is the engine. That is the fundamental disconnect here. Let's look at the value for money concept you keep bringing up. In the public sector, value isn't just the lowest price. It is quality. It is timeliness. It is long-term social outcomes. To get that, you need smart, empowered procurement officers who can negotiate complex, nuanced deals with the market. You don't get that by beating them over the head with a 35-point compliance checklist every time they open an email. You get it by having basic standards. Let's talk about the cumulative spend issue again, because I think it perfectly highlights our difference in approach. A system can fix that specific problem tomorrow. A computer program can say, stop, you have paid this vendor $49,000, you cannot pay them another cent without initiating a public tender. That does not require happy staff. It requires a functioning IT system.
And what happens when a critical water pipe bursts at 2 in the morning and the emergency vendor is locked out of your functioning IT system? The staff member overrides it. And if they are scared of being yelled at for breaking the new strict rules, they hide the override. And we are right back to square one. The audit revealed that confrontational behaviors were driving the non-compliance. Until the new council addresses the interdepartmental warfare between the engineers who just want to build things and the accountants who just want to save money, the software is completely irrelevant.
I suppose my skepticism comes from the fact that we see this exact pattern so often in New Zealand local government. We see these massive failures of basic process, and the excuse rolled out by management is always capacity constraints or workplace culture. But the result for the public is always exactly the same: higher rates, degraded services, and more debt. The Hamilton example stands as a stark warning to every council in the country. That $239 million figure is a monument to weak governance.
It is a monument to weak governance. I agree with that. But it is also a warning about the fragility of our civic institutions. We assume these councils are big, robust, fail-safe machines. In reality, they are very often small groups of incredibly stressed people trying to manage impossible urban growth with entirely inadequate tools.
Which brings us back to the role of the elected members, the new council. Their job is to bridge that gap. They need to provide the resources to fix the culture. Yes, I'll concede that. But they also need to demand the absolute transparency that was missing back in 2024. No more public excluded workshops for major operational failures.
I agree with that. The daylight is absolutely necessary now. But the timeline for this fix needs to be realistic. The 3-year roadmap is highly ambitious. Rebuilding trust, both internal trust so staff feel safe to speak up about broken processes, and external trust so the public stops assuming the worst, that takes much longer than a single electoral cycle.
And that is the ultimate political trap, isn't it? The new council has 3 years to fix a decade of rot. If they don't show tangible results, if they don't show the public that the procurement leakage has definitively stopped, they will be punished at the ballot box just like their predecessors.
And if they rush it and push too hard on compliance without fixing the culture, they might break the organization entirely. It is a massive high-wire act.
Let's broaden this out for our listeners before we wrap up today. If you are a ratepayer, whether you're in Hamilton or Auckland or Wellington, what should you be looking for? For me, it is the audit reports. Don't just look at the shiny consultation brochures the council puts in your letterbox. Look at the audit and risk committee agendas. That is where the bodies are buried.
I would add to that, look at staff turnover. If your local council is churning through CFOs or procurement managers every 18 months, that is a canary in the coal mine. It tells you the internal culture is broken. And if the culture is broken, your ratepayer money is likely not safe.
A very fair point. And look for the cumulative spend data if you can dig it up. Ask your local counselors, what percentage of your overall spend is non-tendered? If they can't answer you, or if the answer is anywhere near 75%, you have a serious problem.
Ideally, we all want efficiency and transparency. But in the messy, real world of local government, sometimes you have to choose which one you sacrifice just to keep the city moving. Hamilton sacrificed transparency and process to keep the gears turning, and the cost was incredibly high.
Way too high. And the debt pile proves it. The social license to spend public money is earned through daylight, not through LGOGI-MA redactions.
On that, at least, we can agree.
We will leave it there. A highly complex issue with massive stakes for the Waikato and a crucial lesson for every ratepayer in New Zealand.
Indeed. There's definitely more to explore in how these roadmaps actually play out.
Thank you for listening to the debate. We will catch you next time.